Sarah got a report of a tiny owl blocking the road. She quickly drove to the scene, where a couple of cars were hesitant to drive due to the tiny owl. Sarah stepped out of her patrol car and approached the baby owl cautiously. To her surprise, the little owl didn't flinch or attempt to fly away. Instead, it hopped closer to her, emitting a series of soft hoots. Confused but determined to help, Officer Sarah knelt down and extended her hand, allowing the baby owl to hop onto her gloved finger. It was clear this young owl needed assistance, but Officer Sarah couldn't figure out what was wrong. When she arrived at the scene, cars had messily tried to get around the animal. The cute thing perched on the road, and Sarah noted that it was tiny, its feathers slightly ruffled, and it wasn't budging when people tried to shoo it away gently. It truly seemed adamant about remaining on the road. Sarah knew she had to find out why. It had been a strange thing to call the police for, but as an officer, she was also able to handle road blockages and help traffic continue safely. First, she would try to get the bird off the road. As she approached the animal and asked onlookers to give her some space, the young owl didn't become alarmed. No, the craziest thing happened. The bird started to hop closer, emitting soft hoots as it did so. Sarah crouched down, extending her hand to it. She started to move with the tiny owl to the side of the road, nearing a branch for it to perch on. However, when she tried to put it on the branch, it started flying and landed right in the middle of the road again. Sarah was flabbergasted by this. What could it mean? She didn't understand animals on this level. She had seen the mess the traffic was in, with the growing number of vehicles arriving and now only one road available for a two-way street. Sarah quickly assessed the situation and realized that, regardless of the owl's tiny size, it had managed to halt traffic. Seeing what Sarah was trying to do, local trucker Ray, the male onlooker from before, noticed her efforts and volunteered to help. Together, they directed the traffic, using a nearby alley. Now, Sarah could find out what was going on. As soon as she found that traffic was continuing as it should, she turned back to the young owl. She knelt beside the bird, not wanting to spook it. Seeing how close she was, the animal hopped closer. Looking at its pristine feathers, its alertness and rhythmic breathing, it seemed physically okay. Sarah had no clue what kind of emotional roller coaster she was about to board. Maybe it needed help, which is why it is sitting in the road, gathering everyone's attention. She slowly moved her hand toward it, but as she was close to touching it, the animal did something strange. The small owl pecked her, its beak going against her glove. Despite the protection, she could still feel the sharpness of its beak. She gasped. It seemed like the metal cord was attached to one of its small claws. It held something that looked like a coin or pendant. A deep blue gemstone had caught the light and reflected it at her. She slowly stood up and grabbed her phone to make a call. With the roadblock in place and the mystery of the pendant dangling in her mind, she dialed one of her friends who worked at the zoo, Dr. Stephen Mitchell, a local wildlife expert who specialized in birds of prey. "Hey, Sarah, I thought you were working today. Are you all right?" Stephen asked when he answered the phone. Sarah didn't even know where to begin. "Hey, Mitchell," she began. "I've got a unique situation here, a baby owl right in the middle of the road, and it refuses to move." "Anything else that's odd?" he asked. "Well, there's a metal cord around its leg, and it's holding something attached to it in its claw. It tried to peck me when I tried to take it. Can you come to take a look?" Stephen agreed, and a dusty SUV arrived at the scene within a few minutes. "Hey, Sarah," he said, surveying the scene, his eye falling on the small owl still standing in the exact spot on the road. Stephen's brow furrowed. "I've dealt with many bird-related issues, but this is certainly a first." Stephen also noted how the owl wasn't frightened by their approach. Furthermore, even when Stephen softly touched the owl, it didn't seem to budge. It only ruffled its feathers and tried to use its beak on Stephen when he tried to touch the claw holding the item. Sarah couldn't understand why the bird had hopped on her finger before when it was now so adamant about not being touched. Attached to its leg was a pendant that seemed out of place. She could feel the weight of its significance. Still, she had to wonder, How did a tiny owl come across such an item? Dr. Stephen Mitchell, his face lined with intrigue, suggested a gentler approach. These creatures are sensitive, he whispered. They both moved in slow, deliberate motions, trying to foster a bond of trust with the owl. The bird's talons gripped the pendant, its eyes darting between the two humans, assessing their intentions. Sarah, recalling her initial interaction, began by extending her gloved hand slowly. The owl, recognizing her, hopped onto her finger, still clutching the pendant. With Stephen's guidance, they carefully maneuvered to examine it. The owl's occasional hoots and flutters were a testament to its anxiety, but they remained patient. The pendant's metallic sheen finally came into full view, revealing an intricate design and markings. Dr. Mitchell's eyes widened in recognition. "This is a trail marker pendant," he exclaimed. "Hikers use them to commemorate their journeys. But why would an owl have one?" Sarah's mind raced. The local hiking community was tight-knit, and such pendants weren't easily misplaced. The connection between Robert, the missing hiker, and this baby owl grew stronger in her mind. There was a story here, one that went beyond a simple lost item. They needed answers, and they had the first piece of the puzzle right in their hands. The local hiking community, with its traditions and tales, was vast, but this specific pendant with its unique markings should have a trace. Their efforts paid off when they stumbled upon a picture of Robert, the missing local hiker, proudly holding up a pendant that matched the one in their possession. Sarah mused aloud. "It's improbable, but what if this little one had an encounter with Robert?" Dr. Mitchell, deep in thought, nodded slowly. "Nature works in mysterious ways," he replied. Meeting Robert's family brought the gravity of their quest into sharper focus. With determination burning in their eyes, Sarah, Dr. Mitchell, and the owl embarked on the path that Robert may have taken. The bird clung to Sarah's shoulder. As they stepped onto the trails, it became clear they were not just following a map, but the intuition of an owl. The owl's reactions were sharp, turning its head, flapping its wings, or hooting at specific junctures like a compass pointing north. It gestured them along the right path, an emissary between the known and unknown. The dew was vigilant, observing the ground and surroundings. Here, a broken branch. There, an imprinted boot mark. Robert had been there, and the signs of his journey, albeit faint, were present. With every hint, they felt closer to the mystery of his disappearance. The bond between Sarah and the owl deepened, the bird instinctively leading her forward. As the day waned and the shadows lengthened, their journey led them to an ancient oak, its sprawling roots creating natural alcoves in the earth. The owl, usually so composed, became restless, its hoots more frequent and urgent. Beneath the oak's roots lay something out of place, a fabric, dirty and torn, peeking out from the soil. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as they started to dig, revealing more cloth, then a bag, and finally a glimpse of the pendant Robert wore in the photo. They found Robert, or rather, they found where he had been, but his body was absent. Instead, there was evidence of a campsite, hastily abandoned, with signs of a struggle and, most tellingly, large claw marks in the soil. Dr. Mitchell whispered, "It looks like he was attacked, but by what?" As they stood in that hallowed spot, the owl perched on Sarah's shoulder, the pendulum of emotions swung between hope and despair. They had answers, but also more questions. The journey back to town was somber, the owl remaining quiet as if sensing the weight of the revelation. As they emerged from the trees, the weight of their discovery pressed down on them. Their return to Robert's family was bittersweet. They had found signs of him, but no body, leaving an open-ended mystery. The family thanked Sarah and Dr. Mitchell profusely, their gratitude tinged with sorrow. The owl, its duty seemingly fulfilled, was returned to the care of Dr. Mitchell.